Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Dear students, today we're going to learn about the Sqlite database and its implementation. The Sqlite database is a persistence which gives persistence to your project, to your app, but this database is not like a conventional database management system where you have database management system running on a system and your app actually interact with the actual database management system, which is very robust and all that. But here we have just a simple file-based database management system, which is the ISQL. And uh, this database management system is like a file-based, like you have Microsoft Access. The Microsoft Access file that comes with your app as a file. The database comes with your uh, gets attached to your app. So you don't need any database management system running on the phone already, so you don't have to. Only thing is that your app should have that file with it, and it will interact with that file, but in the like a database management system, while you can create, delete, search, you go for next, you go for back record, and all those things what you do, all operations you do on a database management system will be done. But it's a very simple, less resource hogging. You don't have to incur cost for extra database management system, and so on. So it's a file-based management system, and we have created an interface here. Like you see, we got a student. For instance, this is student record here. We got the ID, name, address, email, mobile number, and then we got some buttons like we're gonna add, you're gonna delete, you're gonna say clear. Then this is the last button. This is the first. This will show the first record. This will show the previous, and this will go for the next. So we have actually. Let me fit it. Okay, so we have to actually load the database into it. Then we can add, we can save, we can delete, we can clear, and we can go, we can traverse the database to and fro, go from last, go from first, go from previous, and go from next. Okay, now how we do that? Okay, so what I do is I go here, and in my this is my data is my name of this project. What I do is I go here, right click, and say new. So here I make new package for my, because the Java file which deals with the database should be a different, it should be in a different package. So this is the conventional way of doing. And then in that package you make a class. But I here will say directly the class, which is I want to do two things in a one step: creating package and a class. Doing this in a one step is you just go to create a class. Okay, and here is your package com.example.mydata, and you say .db here, so that it will make a different package. Okay, in the same source. Okay, and give the name, say for example my data manager. Okay, this is the class name, and say finish. Now you got here the my data manager. This is the guy which will actually create database and do all kind of things with the database. And this is in a different package. Now if you could see here, we got this in a different package. We got two packages here. So this is a different package, this is a different package. So main activity is the basically which will interact with this file to fetch data at all and load in the layout. This one activity main, and this activity main is basically linked with this main activity.java, right? So you have to interact these two activities, which are happen to be in a separate package. This is, you have to keep it in mind. The first thing what I do here is I create some, like I say public static final string. So what I'm doing is I will make some string, like for example, what is my database name? Database. Or maybe I say DB name. It should be kept because I'm creating constants. And database name is, for example, S capital, I say student. Okay, I copy this out, Control Alt and back swallow down arrow, and here I'm saying what is the table name? I want to create a table, and table name is S small student, for example. Okay, now Control Alt and down arrow, Then I got those fields like ID, should be caps. Okay, what is the ID? Okay, I say it's the ID. Control Alt down arrow. Then we got the name, right? So caps say name, and here I'm gonna say small name. Control Alt down. And I go next one is my, for example, address, address, and this guy is the small address. Okay, let's Control Alt and go down, and here we have gotten the email. Okay, and here I will make a small email. Control Alt down arrow. Then we got the last one, that is the phone number. Maybe I call it phone. Simple. And here I say small phone. Okay, so these are some string constants which I created, so that this will help us in creating some table, because I don't want to push when I say, for example, in the ISQL I can actually create my tables using these fields, which I can get from outside, or I can get from these guys. So this is the next thing to do. One more thing which I forgot is very important. Control Alt down arrow. That is the version, which should be there, VER, and let this be equals to, version is gonna be 1, and it should be int here. So this is the thing. So the version is very important, because when you create the database, the version tells us whether we should create it. If the version is 1, that means you don't have to create a database, or if there is no database, for example, of this name, it will create it, but if it is there, it will not create it. It will omit creating. So that means this version is very important. We'll talk this when we create our private class. We will come to it soon. What basically we will do is we will have because we are using Sqlite, and in the Sqlite we have a lot of packages and a lot of things to do, a lot of classes which we can interact with. But one of the classes is Sqlite Open Helper. So we will be using Sqlite Open Helper basically to do all kind of things. But that will be much easier to work with. So we have here what's called, I would say it's a private. What's happening with this? Private, maybe I call it the final class. Let me call it the SOH, Sqlite Open Helper. Okay, let me call it SOH, and it extends basically, okay, Sqlite Open Helper, Sqlite Open Helper, like this. Okay, let it extend the Sqlite Open Helper. Okay, now it has some constructors to build and something like that. You say add unimplemented methods. Okay, you got it. And one more thing, which says add constructor. Okay, adding the constructor to this Sqlite Open Helper. Let me make it bigger. Now what I'm saying is I'm creating a final class, private final class SOH, which extends the Sqlite Open Helper, right? And I go to the public. This is the constructor here, which specifies that when you create the object, now this SOH is basically the subclass of this Sqlite Open Helper, right? So it is in itself the Sqlite Open Helper, because it extends this, everything of Sqlite Helper goes into it. So it's a subclass of this Sqlite Open Helper. Okay, so if you see a helper class to manage database creation and version management, it does everything for us. So the first thing will be this constructor, which says that hey, you're gonna load the context. Context is because because if you see here, um, you're using my database manager is here, and you may be using this in the main activity. So that means the main activity, which activity basically is using this class, depends on this context. That means you have to pass the context of this main activity to this activity, to my database manager, right? So because this is not an activity, so this my database manager is to be, this activity has to pass its context so that it can use uh, uh, my database manager stuff into the main activity. So this is what this context is all about. Then there are a lot of things, like we have database name, we have cursor factory. Okay, if you see, it allows user to allow returning subclass of cursor and calling query. So where is your basically the cursor? uh, this thing is like cursor factory. And we may have the version. The version is this version, which version we have. Okay, and then then it gives the call to the superclass, where it will send this context, the name of the database, the factory, the cursor factory, and the version to the superclasses. That means when you are creating the SQL helper, you have to pass it from outside, but we don't have to pass it outside because we have these guys here, right? So we do something else. But what I'm talking about, the version is which comes into play here, because we have to sub here the which we have already the methods like on create and on upgrade. If your version is 1, okay, it will go to the on create and it start creating the table basically for you. And if the S version is not 1, okay, then it will go to the if you again come up, right, and the version is 1, okay, so what it does is it will go on the create again. So if the version is 1, it will simply don't do anything because the table is already created. So if the table is not created, then you're going to create it. And if the version is not 1, you want tomorrow upgrade your table, you want to add more stuff to it, then you put up the version 2, for example, and it will go to the upgrade. So the first time it will be on create, and all the time it will be on upgrade, on upgrade, on upgrade later on, right? So what will you do on this on create? You basically have to create a table. So I say this, the database which is being passed to this, that will be passed. We have not yet created anything on that. We will create it eventually. But when this will be called, actually the SQLite database will be passed to it. So DB will be holding the instance of that database. So you say DB dot execute SQL, as you can see here. Then you have to specify some string, and I'm saying here, hey, I'm going to say create underscore table. Okay, what is this create table? We have not yet done with it. We have to create it. This must be a string. Okay, and it will tell us that this create table is not there. And on the upgrade, you're going to say db dot execute exec SQL, and the string will be here drop table, for example, drop underscore table. Again, I have not made that. So what my create table will be the SQL statements to create a table, and what for drop table will be the SQL statements to drop table. And after that, when you have drop to the table, you will call the on create, right? On create, and you will pass this db to it, database, to create the table again, because when on the upgrade it basically drops the table whatever it has. So that again depends on the version. If the version is, that's what it says, old version and new version. So if the old, if it has a 1, the old version, whatever the version was, if it was a 1, 2, 3, so you created a table and it was the version 1. So now you make the version 2, so this will chuck the old versions 2, so I may have to drop it, the old table, and create the new table. And similarly, if you the version is now 2, and next time you come up again it's a 3, so it again drops the table and creates. So it depends the version, which version it is, upgraded work accordingly. Now the thing is that we have to create these constants create table, and I have to create this constant as drop table. Okay, so I got somewhere, okay, here is this guy. So he created some constants here, okay, like a create table and the drop table. But what I will do is I will cut it out. I will cut these guys. Okay, and I will put it outside here and say Control A and Control I to format the guys. Okay. Okay. Now this create table is basically, I don't put a null. This create table will have a string which you have learned in your SQL, Oracle, and all in the previous class database management system to create a table. So different this will be the same SQL query. So what I gonna say create table equals to, okay, this create table should be a string, right? Like, let me control Z and just do it again so that we'll understand properly. Okay, I will say here in the caps it should be all string, the one string, right? And we will create table, table, create table. Okay, then I concatenate it with the table name. That's gonna be this table which I created here. Copy. The student is the what I want to write here. So I will paste it. Control V, table, create table. Okay, plus concatenate it with the differently the starting the, because you say create table name, then you have the starting parentheses where you will say your fields, right? So what I do is here plus, and the first field is my ID, that is this guy ID. I say copy it and I paste it here. Control V. Now ID, concatenate with it. What is this ID gonna be? The data type of this ID, that is gonna be integer. Okay, and this is gonna be my primary key. Okay, and I want auto increment, AUTO, auto increment. So this ID is gonna be integer, it's gonna be primary key, it's gonna be auto increment. That means you don't have to actually put the ID into it, and it will be automatically done. It will be incremented automatically. And plus concatenate with it the next field of ours. What is that gonna be? Okay, that's gonna be the name, and that is this guy. Okay, copy it and paste it here. Name. Okay, and the name should be, what should be the name? Name should be the text, right? After ID I should have some space, because otherwise it will put things together, right? I should have space. So we have to create where we see if there is some problem in it. Integer, primary key, auto increment, and then as a name. Okay, I should have space here as well, because otherwise name will come with this. And I should also have here the comma, right? I should also have here the comma, which I forgot. The name, and name is gonna be what? The text. Name is gonna be the text. And I'm saying, hey, this should be not null. This should not be null. Okay. Okay. Then after that, it should also have a comma with it, and concatenate with it the next guy, that is the address. That is this guy. And put it down here. Control V, address plus double quote close, and basically this thing. Copy this and paste it here. Control V. Okay, this is got to be not null. And the next thing is gonna be the email, right? Copy this, paste it here. Control V, and simply do plus with it. Control V. This is, oh, I should copy that. So I should say like this. Control Alt this, and here I say cut it and paste it here. Okay, this is my email. Then I say Control Alt, go down, and this is guy is the after email I have phone. So that's PHONE phone. That's again gonna be text because I'm not taking that as integer because let it's big numbers. I don't know will that accommodate or not. So let me safe aside put the phone as my text. And after I am done with this, okay, I should have the closing currencies. Is it so that is here? I don't need a comma here. Rather, I need a closing currencies. Okay, and the plus. Rather, I need a terminal, and this will complete my string. So this create table basically is a string which says create table, the table name, whatever the table name is, then parentheses, and I have here the ID name. ID is the integer primary key auto increment. Name is the text not null. Address is the text not null. Email is the text not null. Phone is the, and only thing is ID here, which is the auto increment. You have to put it. So I don't know. I have put it rightly. If I have rightly, it will create the database. If I have not, I have to change it here. Right. Now we have here the drop table example, and this is gonna be which I say drop table if exists, and with it which one, the table name, and that is I have the table name like this. This is the table. Copy this, Control V. So I'm saying here drop table is a string which says, hey, you drop the table if it exists. The table is the student table. Okay, let me mark the end of my these classes first, so that this is my database, right? And where is the end of the database? That is this guy. So this is the end of which class? My data manager, right? My data. So I can do this. End of my data manager class and something like that, right? And where is the end of the SOH class? SOH. This is the SOH class, right? And this is gonna be the end of SOH class. Sqlite Open Helper, right? Okay. Now, what I do here is I'm gonna have two methods here, which will basically open the database and which will basically close the database. So I will have here public void open a method, right? And I have also here the public void to close. So that's what I'm saying is, if you want to open the database, you will call this open method, and if you want to basically close the database, you will call the close method. Okay. So now I need some instances of this SOH class, and I sometimes also need the instance of the database manager class, which will basically create database for me, right? So we have to do a lot of things now. So basically, who is the guy which will actually create the instance of this data manager class, right? The thing is to understand that. So who will create the database manager's object is differently. It's gonna be the this is the main activity, which is gonna create the instance of the data my data manager class, right? So definitely this my data manager, I want to create the instance of this my data manager, copy into where this is gonna be used. This is gonna be used here. So I say paste, okay, my data manager, and let me call it data manager, right? Manager, whatever. So I'm creating in the instance of the my data manager as data manager, and definitely it's going to be imported because it's in a different package, right? I need to import my data manager because this is in a different package. So I'm importing this, and data manager becomes my it becomes too, isn't it too bigger? Let me make it small. Data man, let's call it data man. This is data manager. Okay. Now on the create of this method, I am now creating this data man equals to new, definitely it's going to be the my database manager, and I'm passing the context. That means this activity, because this data manager should uh, know which activity is basically calling it, because this is not an activity. My data manager is just a simple class, right? That's not an activity. It's not extending any activity, so it should know which activity I'm interacting with. So therefore main activity uh, is to be passed, the context is to be passed to the instance of this data management, and you call it. But the thing is, the my database manager should have a constructor. Manipulating the data management, they should have a constructor like this, right? So I go ahead here and I say create a constructor. So it's going here in the my data manager, so it started creating the constructor here. So this my data manager has a constructor which has the which has an here the main activity. That means this means that this main activity of its type, right? But that means this my data manager file can interact with only with the particular this main activity. Not maybe we want this data manager to interact with another activity. So it's not a better idea to make a constructor just tied up with this particular this activity called main activity. Okay, this is the main activity name. Okay, it may be, say for example, data activity. You have kept the name is as the some college activity. So you are creating only the college activity here. That means it's tied up to this class only. So this is not a better idea. Better idea is to create a superclass, which is the context, right? And of that type, I'm saying context. Getting me? And I'm preserving this context. So this is what I'm doing is I'm making this data manager as a general purpose. So any activity can call it with its says the main activity. Tomorrow we have this is a student activity, for example. Then we have, say for example, the teacher activity. We may have the other activity. So they may anyone can call this my data manager because it has now the general purpose constructor which can take up the context. Context will have the context of any activity. Okay, and I want to preserve this context. Okay, same way as a my context variable my context equals to this context. Okay, now definitely I don't have my context, so I need to create a local variable. So maybe I can create a field my context. So this is being created, private context my context. Now this is the context which holds the main activity this time, because here the main activity actually creates the object of this guy, my data manager, and you're sending the context of this activity, the main activity, and this is being bundled into this here. So this my context has the activity exactly uh, the main activity in it, right? So what we are doing basically here is that I am creating the make bigger in this class. I am having a lot of things here now. I created the class my data manager, which has all these strings, and it's the create table and drop table as an SQL query. That and then we had a private final class. So this is the basic class, which actually does all the things, which is the private inside this uh, my data manager class, right? And this is actually the guy who will create things for us, right? We have to do a lot of things here, and which extends it to Sqlite Open Helper. Because Sqlite Open Helper is the class which will help us to create, open, and all activities which we want to do with the database. And I have that on create and on upgrade two methods, which will say db.execute SQL and db.execute SQL, where I'm saying drop table and I say create table, which has been created with the final strings on the top. And here if the trouble first it drops the table, then it creates again if the version is different, right? And I have a private context, my context, my own this thing, and then uh, I basically have basically I can cut it out, I can make it on the top, cut it, I can make it on the top somewhere. Let it be here, control V. Okay, pretty little space with it. Okay, now you have the open. Now open means some activity wants to open the database. So that means they will create the object of the data manager like this, and then create its new instance, and then they will say dataman.open, right? So when the dataman.open is called, it basically calls this open here. uh, the dataman can do nothing other than creating the object of this SOH, right? And so and when it creates the SOH, because you have passed the context of that activity, and you have to in turn pass that context to this SOH class. So that means when you go here open, you basically say maybe some instance of the SOH, which I have not yet created. I will create it, create as far as is equal to new uh, differently SOH is the actual class name. This is the instance of it, it's the object of it, and I have to pass with it, the context. And context is already created. I know the context, that's my, I saved that into the my context, right? This is where I saved, because somebody who calls the data manager, who created the object data manager, has passed the context that's gone into the my context now. That's why I saved it, because this might, and when that on that object's open method is called, right? And the open basically creates the method, creates the object of the SOH class, and passes the context of that activity to it, right? And here I have to first create a field of SOH. So to create somewhere, say for example on the top, where is it created? Let me see. Yeah, here it's created the after SOH, right? Okay. So we are saying SOH is got new SOH my context, and if you could see here, here, there's a problem because the constructor of the SOH, which is here, has a lot of things, but I don't want basically all these things to be specified from outside, because I want only the context to be here, right? I want only the context in the constructor. Okay, so rest of the things which are already here in this class itself, so I don't need other guys. So in this SOH, I'm saying only pass the my context. This is the actually the activity which is called the, which has created the object of this my data manager class, and in turn, and then has called the open method, where we created the instance of the SOH class. Okay, the object of the SOH class. And also, now you may be wondering, where is the database coming? Where is the Sqlite database? That's, I say, Sqlite DB, or the Sqlite database equals to this SOH, okay, which is the instance of the SOH class dot. Now you may have a lot of things, like you could see here, get database name, get readable database, get writable database. These two guys I'm interested this time. So what I'm saying is get a readable database. That means this is the Sqlite database, but you want only read only. Okay, create and or open a database. But if you have here the writable database, you can do all kind of things, reading and writing. In this case, you will be doing only the reading, right? And because this is get readable, so that writable database means you can be doing reading as well as writing. So this is obviously I need this guy. So in the open, I get to do two things. One is to create the instance of the Sqlite Open Helper object. Okay, the SOH is the extends the Sqlite Open Helper, so it's itself I can say this is a Sqlite Open Helper class. So I have to create the instance of that and send the my context. That this is the context of the activity is calling, and then create the object of the SQLite database, and where's the SOH dot write database. So if I say here the make the field, create field SDB, okay, and then yeah, here we've got SDB, which that's actually SDB because it's the Sqlite database. This is the object of the Sqlite database. So whenever you say here in the open, because open, you're gonna say two things. One is the instance of the SOH class, which says create the new instance of SOH class and pass the my context to that, and then you create an object of the Sqlite database, which is basically creating the instance of the Sqlite database SDB, and we are saying, hey, open this SOH, okay, this SOH, which is gonna be the actual database, right? Which is the, we'll see where we created the database. This actually create the database, and that too in a readable and writable mode. Okay. The question is, where is that database this SOH is creating? That's gonna be in super. Okay, this is the super which is waiting for us, because in the name you say, hey, what's the name? So that's why I don't need to pass it for the outside, because I already created here the DB name. This is gonna be the database name copy. So this is where I pass it into this, paste. And the context is the context, we know this, whatever the context is, because whenever you created the instance of the SH class, you basically here in the open method, you basically pass the my context, that's the main activity, and that's being copied into the mm, where, okay, into the constructor here, the context, and that's this context. This is actually it was superclass. What's the superclass of this? It's the Sqlite Open Helper, and it will pass into that context, that activity which is requesting the database and all. And then we have the DB name. The DB name is basically the database to be created, and then with the factory, okay, the factory what to do is let's simply say null, because I don't want any cursors to be located and so on, right? So in the super, if you see, we have if you see the factory to use for creating cursor object or null for the default, right? So you want to create a cursor object so that the cursor is where, which you can understand the DB system, which will actually take us to the where we want the data and so on, and create the object of that is in the factory. So we don't want that, okay? So name is the database file, okay, it's a database name. Context is to open or create the database, basically to use open the context is the activity which is want to create and open the database and so on. The version is it starts from version, you know, if you see the version number of database starting at the 1. If it is older, upgrade will be used to upgrade the database. If the database newer, on downgrade will be used. That's the parameters of actually this super, and then the methods of the super, that is the SQL Open Helper. So we don't have to worry about that, because that's been done automatically. So we have say null, and here the version is differently. We have the word, right? We have the word that this guy, the constant. So so literally I am done by creating the database. Now we had to do a lot of things, right? We had to do a lot of things. If I go to the activity main, okay, then we have to add, we delete, we have to clear, we have to do a lot of things here. But the thing is that it will basically create my database. By this, we have finished creating database, right? So if there is no error, let's give it a go. So what I do is I say, what's this, the name of this is my data. I say my data, and before I run it, I should go to the DDMS. Okay, let me go to the DDMS, and I go to the file explorer, and in the file explorer I find my my data somewhere. Wait a second. In the data folder, basically I find this. One thing I forgot, that if you don't call the open, how will it open the things, right? I have actually launched this app. It's trying to run, but the thing is it will not open unless we don't go where? We don't go to the my data and main activity, and in the here you have to create data man, okay, dot open, isn't it? If you don't open it, how it gonna open, right? So save everything. Now you go to the DDMS, okay, and you select this guy, and then in the data you have to find basically your project. In this, you go to the data folder and then go to the, actually run it once without creating that. Go to the, again, the data. In the data we have the data, right? This is the data, and we have here the data, and in this we find this, whatever the package name was, that was like example of my data, right? This one. Okay, this is the our folder, right? Now what you do is you go to the Java. Oh, it's the same problems going on in the back. Okay, basically what you do is you just run it. Okay, but go back to the Java one second. Go back to the Java, and then here I say data.open, and I'll just open it, save it, and go to DDMS and give it a go. My data, right? So let it come up, and keep your eyes here. So this is our folder. If our database creation had no errors, it would create it successfully here. Okay, let's see what will come up. It's taking a lot of time. There's a little problem somewhere. Let me, okay, if you look at it now, it has created the database, right? So it has created the database where we have our, that's the student database, right? That was the student database, and it's empty, and it's coming up here. This is the interface we have. Now this is, we have successfully created the database. Now what we gotta do is we gotta do a lot of things, right? That will be in our next video. This is how to create a database. Now to get things from the database onto these edit texts, then to add, then to save, clear, and traverse the database in the next video. Until then, Assalamu.